Hi boys and girls. Today what we're going to do is we're going to be using number bonds to write number sentences to match these tape diagrams to decompose fractions. So before we get started, what I want to do is I want to just simply go over some vocabulary because we know today starts the new unit with fractions. So as you remember, a fraction is part of a whole. So for example, if I have a whole number and I break it into equal parts, the key word is that it's equal. To make it a fraction, each part is worth the same. So this is a whole, one whole object. And in this whole object, I have 1, 2, 3 equal parts. This number right here, the total number I'm dealing with, is called the denominator. Can you whisper to yourself, denominator? Awesome. Now, the numerator is the number that represents how many we're talking about. So for example, if I'm talking about 2 slices of pie out of 3, I have 2/3 of the pie. Well, 2/3 wouldn't equal 1 whole, but 3/3 would be the same as 1 whole. We know that we learned that another way I could write a fraction is a division sign, because 3 divided by 3 equals 1 whole. So we have our numerator, our denominator, and we know that it's part of a whole object. So today what we're going to do is we're going to decompose. Decompose means to break it apart. We're going to break these apart into what we call unit fractions. A unit fraction is where the numerator is 1 and the denominator is whatever you're talking about. So for example, we broke these into thirds. So we were talking about 1, 2, 3. So our denominator is the whole that we're talking about, and then the numerator is how many. So really, we broke this up into 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. These are our unit fractions when the numerator is 1. It's easy to break it up into unit fractions because we like working with the number 1. It definitely makes it easier. And we know 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 3/3, also known as 1 whole. All right, well, let's get started for today. They already did this first one for you, so if you get stuck along the way when we're talking about these tape diagrams or these number bonds, what I want you to do is don't be afraid to go back to this one up here. So I'm just labeling this for us so we remember that this is our number bond, and this diagram up here is a tape diagram. A tape diagram. I think that's important. If you want to pause your video and just label those so you have that vocabulary as well. I would also make sure maybe on your front cover, if you want to go to your front cover and just write yourself a note that the numerator is the top number, and then we have denominator. So you know the parts of the fraction, okay? Go ahead and pause your video and write those all down, okay guys? All right, let's get started with B. So what I want to try to do is I want to take out a unit fraction. First, before I do that, I know that I'm talking about 1 whole object, and I need to figure out, well, how many parts am I talking about? If this entire thing is 1 whole, let's figure out our denominator, how many parts we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. So my denominator is out of 5. They are only shading in 1, 2, 3, 4. So I really have 4/5 is what I'm talking about, right? So the 4/5 is really going to be the start of my number bond. I'm not even going to look at this because I'm not talking about a full object. So I have 4/5, and I'm going to break it apart into unit fractions. So if I first start and just take out a unit fraction, remembering a unit means 1 out of 5. And now that I have the 1, I want to see, well, what else do I have? I have 1, 2, 3 left. So if I added 1/5 plus 3/5, I know my number bond is 4/5. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite that 1/5 plus 3/5 equals 4/5. This is my number sentence to show my number bond, okay? Go ahead and take a minute and draw that in or write that in if you didn't do so. We're going to go on to C. I unfortunately don't have a lot of room with mine because the editing, I think, or something, the layout of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look here, and I've got to figure out the parts. So first, we got to look at our denominator. 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. And how many are colored in? That will tell us, oh, sorry guys, you can't see. That will tell us how many our numerator is. So how many shaded in? 1, 2, 3. So in my number bond, I'm dealing with 3/4. So 3/4, I could do my unit fractions, and I can add 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, and it goes ahead and it equals 3/4. Why don't you guys go ahead and try D? First, figure out your denominator, write your number bonds, and then go through and write your equation with your number bond. Go for it. Pause your video. Okay, so if we take a closer look at this one, you'll notice they didn't break this one up into unit fractions. They had their whole thing is out of 6 parts, and we have 4 out of 6 colored in. So we broke it apart. They broke theirs apart by like benchmark fractions, which are fractions we use to usually estimate with. And we have 2/6 plus 2/6 equals 4/6. One thing I want you to notice when we're adding these fractions, our denominators are not staying, or they are staying the same. They're not changing. The only thing that's changing is my numerators. When I add them, it gets bigger because our parts aren't changing. Okay, I want you to try E all by yourself. Don't get tricked here because this is one whole and then we have another part on top of it. So I want you to take a minute to look at that one, try it, and then check back with the video and we'll go through to double check your work, okay? So go ahead, pause your video and try E, please. All right, guys, there's definitely a few ways you could have done this. So first, what I like to look at is the one whole. I have 1, 2, 3 out of 3. And then after that, what I have is I have another third and I have another third. See how they're the equal pieces? That's how I know that they're thirds. We obviously know that 3/3, 3 divided by 3, equals 1 whole. And we know 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 2/3. Or you could have written this as 3, 4, 5 out of 3. So if this is our fraction that we're talking about, our number bond would be 3/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. And all together it equals 5/3. Or you can write it, this number is called a mixed number. It's a mixture between a whole number and a fraction. So this is called a mixed number. Or if you've seen it this way, this is called an improper fraction. If you've heard of the term improper fraction, what I'd like you to do on the top right of your paper, right up here, I'd like you to write a star. That's going to tell me, hey, Mrs. Andrews, I've heard of this term, improper fraction. Go ahead and put a star if you've heard of it. If you haven't, don't put a star. Okay, last but not least, what we're going to do down here, it says draw and label tape diagrams to model each decomposition. So what you're going to do is we're going to kind of do the opposite. If you notice, there's no tape diagram. There's none of these diagrams. So what we're going to do is based on these number sentences, we're going to go back up here and draw a tape diagram. I see for this first one that it needs to equal 1 whole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my tape diagram and it's going to equal 1 whole. So I'm going to show that just like they did up here. Now I know if it's going to equal 6, there's 6 parts, I need to break this into 6 equal parts. What I like to do is break it in half, right, in half. Then I'm going to break these into thirds because a third and a third, 3/3, 3/3 should equal 6 parts. Let's double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And remember, they have to be equal. We don't want them to look completely different. Now we can label underneath. 1/6, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And if you add them all up, it should equal 6/6, also known as 1 whole. Go ahead and draw that if you didn't do so already. All right, what I'd like you to try to do is I'd like you to follow these. Now remember, if it tells you to do 1/5, then you would use like just this simple band to kind of show that. If it does 2/5, you're gonna band them together with 2 out of 5. Go ahead and try B, E, and F, and then check back in the video to compare your work with mine. Good luck, guys. All right, guys, if you want to take a second to check it out, how I followed my equation to then make my tape diagram. If you want to pause it to double check or maybe take a screenshot just to make sure you have the right one. Before you move on to station 1, please make sure this is finished. So if you did not finish this problem set, you should not be moving on to a station when it's time to switch, okay? Once you finish it, then you can rejoin your station. Okay, good luck, guys.